E. I could feel his eyes on me the moment I walked into the room. Not the warm, familiar gaze of my fiancé, Ethan, but the sharp, piercing stare of his father, Richard. There was something about Richard that always unsettled me. He had this aura of control and power, a charisma that drew people to him like moths to a flame. And, despite every ounce of my better judgment, I couldn't deny that I was one of them. It started innocently, or so I'd convinced myself. A lingering glance here, a casual comment there. Richard's compliments were different from Ethan's. Where Ethan would call me beautiful in a sweet, almost boyish way, Richard's words carried weight, dripping with intent. "You have a way of commanding attention when you walk into a room," he once told me, his voice low and smooth. I laughed it off, but my cheeks betrayed me with their heat. The first real crack in my resolve came during Ethan's birthday dinner. Richard's hand brushed mine as he passed me the wine, and I swear the room tilted for a moment. I looked up, startled, and his eyes locked onto mine. There was a fleeting second where the noise of the restaurant disappeared, and it was just us, suspended in a dangerous moment neither of us dared to acknowledge. From that night on, I found myself noticing things I shouldn't. The way Richard's shirts hugged his broad shoulders, the confidence in his stride, the subtle smirk that played on his lips when he caught me staring. I hated myself for it. Ethan was everything I'd ever wanted, kind, loyal, and endlessly devoted. But Richard was temptation incarnate. The turning point came during a family gathering at their lake house. Ethan was off with his cousins, laughing and playing some game, while I found myself alone in the kitchen, struggling to open a stubborn jar. Richard walked in, his presence filling the space in an instant. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice smooth as silk. Before I could respond, he was behind me, his hands covering mine as he took the jar. The heat of his body pressed against my back was intoxicating, and my breath hitched. The jar opened with a pop, but neither of us moved. His hand lingered on mine, and I felt his breath on my neck. "You should be careful," he murmured. "You're playing a dangerous game." "What game?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his touch, heard his words. I told myself it was just a harmless crush, something that would fade with time, but deep down I knew better. The next time it happened, there was no one else around to serve as a buffer. Ethan had gone out of town for work, and I stopped by Richard's office to drop off some documents Ethan had forgotten. I planned to be in and out in under 5 minutes, but Richard had other ideas. "Stay for a drink," he said, gesturing to the bar cart in the corner of his luxurious office. I hesitated, but his charm was impossible to resist. One drink turned into 2, and soon we were sitting on the leather couch, the space between us shrinking with every passing second. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice soft but intense. "You have this spark. It's impossible to ignore." I should have walked away. I should have laughed it off. Made an excuse, anything to put distance between us. But instead I leaned in, drawn to him like gravity. The moment our lips met, it was as if a dam had burst. The kiss was electric. Every suppressed feeling and stolen glance culminating in that one explosive moment. Guilt consumed me the second we pulled apart. "This is wrong," I said, my voice trembling. "We can't do this." Richard's expression darkened. "Do you really believe that?" he asked. "Or are you just afraid to admit what you want?" I didn't have an answer, and he didn't press me for one. But the damage was done. From that point on, resisting him felt impossible. We stole moments whenever we could, each one more dangerous than the last. The thrill of secrecy was addictive, but it came at a cost. Every time I looked at Ethan, I felt a pang of guilt so sharp it was almost physical. Ethan began to notice the change in me. "Is everything okay?" he asked one night. His eyes filled with concern. You've been distant lately. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. But the truth was, I was anything but fine. I was caught in a web of my own making, torn between the man I loved and the man I couldn't resist. The breaking point came one evening when Ethan invited me to dinner with his parents. I spent the entire meal avoiding Richard's gaze, my nerves fraying with every passing moment. After dinner, Richard cornered me in the hallway, his eyes blazing with intensity. "We need to talk," he said. "Not here," I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one could see us. "Then when?" he demanded. "This can't go on forever." He was right, but I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that I was in too deep, and there was no easy way out. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between us became unbearable. Every stolen glance, every accidental touch felt like a spark threatening to ignite a wildfire. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. The pull between us was too strong, the temptation too sweet. One night, when Ethan was working late, Richard showed up at my door. "We need to end this," he said, his voice heavy with regret. But even as he spoke the words, his eyes betrayed him. Before I knew it, we were in each other's arms, consumed by a passion that defied reason. In the aftermath, as we lay tangled together, reality began to set in. "What are we doing?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "This is destroying me." Richard looked at me, his expression a mix of pain and longing. "I know," he said, "but I can't stay away from you." Neither of us had the strength to end it, even though we both knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. And when it did, the fallout was devastating. Ethan found out in the worst possible way, walking in on us during a moment of weakness. The look on his face will haunt me for the rest of my life. In the end, I lost them both. Ethan couldn't forgive me, and Richard's guilt drove him away. I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life, haunted by the choices I'd made and the lives I'd destroyed. Even now, as I sit here telling this story, I'm not sure if I regret it. Part of me knows it was wrong, that I hurt the people I cared about most. But another part of me can't forget the way Richard made me feel, alive, desired, and utterly consumed. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that I lost them, but that I lost myself in the process.